welcome to today's conversation with the Preparedness Corner. We are going to be talking all things gardening. Are you a gardener or are you a hopeful gardener? Or is that something that you have been interested in or maybe felt a little inkling to start planting a few vegetables in your garden? Well, today we're going to be having a conversation with Charlene Nelson. She started just like you and I, just with a small space and a desire to grow something. And over the last 30 plus years, she has been able to grow her garden into something massive and beautiful. She now has 40 by 40 square feet of gardening. Can you believe it? I'm like, that's so much. But she has been able to grow it little by little, year by year. And she's going to be here sharing with us different ideas, tips, and tricks to be able to help us get started. So, all right, let's jump right into the conversation. Hello, everybody. This is Maria here. We are here with Charlene Nelson from Provident Home Companion. And today we're going to be talking about gardening. It is springtime, and I don't know about you, but I'm starting to get the itch of going out there and planting a garden. And specifically with the world being a little bit in chaos today, I feel this call to go back to the earth, back to our dirt. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get vegetables from my grocery store this summer. I don't know. Everything's up there. I wouldn't be surprised at anything these days. And so, how can I, as a mother, as a wife, as a person, be able to grow the food that I need to be able to eat and be able to have a wonderful, thriving summer? So, Charlene, so glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really pleased to be here.
Well, tell us a little bit about your background with gardening.
Well, when we have always wanted to live kind of self-reliantly. We like the idea, my husband and I like the idea of, living out in the country. Our nearest neighbor's a mile down the road. And so we found this perfect place on the plains, just uninterrupted view of the sky and forever and ever. We love it. And when we first moved here, my oldest was about 4.5 or so, and my middle son was about 10 months old. So still little ones. And our first garden when we first moved here, was probably, I don't know, 5 by 10 feet or something like that. And then over the years, we just kind of kept adding to it and would kind of take stock at the end of the year, like how much did this produce and how far through the winter months did it get us? And the end result is that today, 25 or so years later, we have a garden, a fenced vegetable garden that's 40 by 40. And we put chain link fence around it, and we buried 1/2-inch hardware cloth down 18 inches because we have gophers and voles and mice and you name it. We've got all sorts of critters trying to
Oh my goodness.
destroy our garden.
Yummy, like dinner. Thank
Yeah, right?
you for dinner.
And so, yeah, and some of the craziest things we've tried to do to keep the mice and the rabbits away. It's just, anyway, a cat. A cat is a really good thing for your garden. I'll just say that. Anyway, so we have our 40 by 40 vegetable garden, but we also have 4 or 5 apple trees, a crab apple tree. We have an apricot. So we have several fruit trees, plums, and then we planted raspberries and blackberries and gooseberries and Nanking cherries. And then I have a 40-foot bed along one side of the garden that's asparagus. We love asparagus. And then on the other side, 40 foot, I have an herb garden that's like all my perennial medicinal and culinary herbs. And then on the third side of the garden, I have a perennial vegetable bed. And these are vegetables that come up year after year that I don't have to replant. So today, our garden is really quite massive and involved. But I don't want anyone to think they need that kind of a garden because it took us 25 years to get, and increasing it just a little bit each time. Our first garden, like I said, was just this little 5 by 10 foot, thing that we dug out of the sod and created. And I'm just as proud of that 5 by 10 garden as I am my garden today. So it's just being out there and being able to be part of your food creation that's important.
Do you eat all of that, or what do you do? Do you preserve it at the end? How do you manage a lot of that?
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I'll send you a link showing like one summer's harvest, what I did with it. But when all three boys were still at home, I typically canned probably around 500 to 600 jars of food. It would be tomato, salsa, beans, applesauce, you name it, we canned it. I also dehydrated an awful lot. Of course, my herbs, I love dehydrated herbs. Um, and then I also fermented a lot, big 5 gallon crock of sauerkraut every year. Um, and then a lot of it I just store. We have an unfinished basement. Our house was built like it in the early 1900s. And so it has this, think storm cellar kind of situation. And it just gets very cold in our North Dakota winters. And so I store a lot of my root crops, my carrots and radishes and beets and onions and potatoes and those kinds of things are all down in the basement. So I have a multi-pronged approach to preserving food: canning, freezing, drying, root cellar, and fermenting. So
Cool.
yeah, and we and at on my good years when the weather and my health all is in perfect alignment, I will produce probably 80 to 85% of the food that our family will eat in a year's time.
Wow, that is incredible. That is really, really amazing. So I'd love to dive in and just, there's several of us out here who are saying, I just want to get started. I
Right.
don't quite know where to get going. I maybe have a space in my yard that I have designated as my garden spot, even though it may just be a small few square feet. Tell us, how do we get going?
Um, well, if you're brand new to gardening and you've never gardened before, you want to start simple. Um, the simplest thing is radishes. Those nice big seeds, and they grow really fast, about 100% germination, and in 2, 3, 4 weeks, you've got a crop of radishes. And so you can plant several crops of radishes throughout the summer, and radishes all year long. Onion sets, those tiny little bulbs you find in the grocery store at the garden center. Yeah,
Can you get some?
those.
If you're watching on the video,
Yes.
you'll see I'm holding up a bag of onion bulbs that I got from Walmart for $3 or 50.
Yeah.
Not bad.
They're so easy. Again, you just poke them in the ground and you've got onions. You can't fail with those. Um, those are two big never fail crops. Beans are usually another never fail crop. And the nice thing about beans
Green
is
or
green beans. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. When you get beans, you pick them green and you can eat them fresh. You can can them, you can freeze them, whatever you want. They're very versatile that way. I actually do fermented beans, so they're kind of pickly, kind of spicy, like a green bean pickle, kind of. But if you let them grow all summer long and don't pick them, by the fall, they're all dried up and you have dry beans. So you can make a pot of chili with your beans from your garden. So very versatile. Um, and then, of course, you want something really yummy from your garden. So I like lettuce, a little bit of lettuce. Again, easy. You plant it about every week, 10 days, go out and plant another row of lettuce. And it'll keep growing coming up all summer long. You can cut it back and it'll regrow, cut it back and regrow. Now, when your summer is really hot, that lettuce will bolt and become bitter and you won't want to eat it. But that's why you plant another row so it can grow up while it's not quite so hot. Lettuce, tomatoes, and peppers. And if you have peppers and tomatoes, you can make all the salsa your family could want. And who doesn't love fresh salsa? So those are and then I like squash. Take your pick: pumpkin squash, acorn squash, whatever. Oh, winter squash. I'm not talking zucchini. That's a summer squash. You want a winter squash. And why? Well, first of all, it produces lots of big fruit. big pumpkins if you want to grow the really big ones. And they store a long time. You can put them in a cool garage or cool basement room, and they'll store, depending on the variety, anywhere from 3 to 6, 7, 8 months. So you could be eating pumpkin from your garden in February.
That's amazing. I did not know that they stored that long. So talk to me a little bit about the time when do you get started with these things? So winter squash, do you start that in the springtime to be able to grow all summer long, or do you tell me about the timeline of things?
Right. Well, if you are brand new to gardening, just go to the garden center and buy a squash plant. They're already started for you. Same with tomatoes, same with peppers. Just get those already started as plants at your, Walmart or Home Depot or wherever you go for your garden shopping. Beans and radishes, and then those onion sets like you have, you can plant those directly into the ground and they'll be great. But the other ones, the squash and the peppers and the onions, you want to buy those as plants. They'll need a bit of an extra head start. Once you've gardened for 2 or 3 years, however, when you feel confident, let me say that, when you feel confident, then you can start all your plants from seed, which is what I do. In fact, right behind me, that's my seed starting shells that I've got going.
Oh.
And yeah, and so I have 3 flats. Those you can get like that greenhouse little set. Yes, like this. Yep. It's now that one looks like it's 2 feet by 2 feet, like 24 inches by 24 inches, a square one, right?
Like there's about 36 on.
Yeah. The ones I have are like 48 inches long and 24 inches wide. And right now I have 3 of those filled with cells. Here's a picture. These little plastic cells. You can get them either 6 of them, or there's the 4 cell. Now I reuse these. They after a while they'll get kind of beat up and torn, but I'll reuse them as often as I can. Now what I do is I will put them in a sink with a little bit of bleach and soapy dish soap, and let them soak for a little while, because I don't want any of the mold or any germs or pathogens that might have stayed all winter long in the soil. I want my new seeds to start with a nice clean little pot. So I'll wash this out before I actually plant my seed, but I do reuse them, and I'll probably get 3, 4, 5 years use out of this before it's finally so beat up I just toss it. And then here is my tomato seedlings. And you can see I have at least 3 or 4 or 5 little seedlings in here at a time. Now, when you get those Jiffy cells like the ones you showed me that are the little round ones, when you water those, they expand, and then the seed is inside in the middle, and they have a seed. Okay, and those you just want 1 seed in them, because you'll just plant that whole little Jiffy Jiffy cell into the ground. What I do here is, when they start getting their true leaves, and this one is about ready to start true leaves. I don't know if you can see it, but here in about another week or 2, they'll have their true leaves. And what I do is I repot them into newspaper pots. And this is just newspaper strips that I roll around a bottle, and a little bit of glue here, and fill it with soil. And then this goes into the soil, just like this. When I go to plant my garden, I just dig a hole and put the whole thing in there, and this grows into the soil. Wow. So these get reused year after year, and then these are one-time use, but it's recycled newspaper from my,
And it biodegrades right there into the soil. That is really useful. So about when you were putting the seeds in there, how many seeds do you generally go for? I mean, with my setup here with the Jiffy greenhouse, it is 1 seed per little.
Right. Well, yeah, actually that's a good point. So for your little Jiffy ones, what you want to do is put 2 or 3 seeds in each pot. Okay. And then when they grow up and sprout, and you've got nice true leaves on them, then you'll choose the strongest of those 2 or 3 that came up and pull out the others.
Oh, you pull up the others. Okay.
You pull out the others and just leave the one behind. But I can't bear to pull up my plants. I've seen them grow and I really want them to thrive. So I save them, and then that's why I kind of divide them all up and put them into the newspaper pots. That's why I get this right here. This is about 15 little seedlings.
Uh-huh.
And so I'll get hopefully 10 to 12. Not all of them are going to survive. They, get weak. They don't quite grow really well. So I'll get 10 or 12 tomatoes. Now this variety here is purple prudence, which is my husband's favorite. What I did is I took a sour cream lid and just cut it into strips and use it to mark put the names of my different seeds in here.
That's
So I'm all about recycling, repurposing. Nothing gets thrown out. If I can reuse it, I figure out some way to use it.
so smart. I want to ask about the seedlings and about when you plant them. So just say that you have your one that's really thriving. You're ready to put that inside your paper planter and you put it in the ground. How far away do they need to be from one another? Do roots, will they choke one another out if they're too close? Can you talk a
Right.
bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. Every plant is a little different. So, find a good resource guide. There's books on square foot gardening, which are really, really helpful. All sorts of websites. Just Google in, how close can I plant my plants? Beets, for example, should be 3 to 4 inches apart. Beans, 6 to 8 inches apart. Tomatoes, about 18 inches apart. Your squash and your vining ones also about 18 to 12. Well, now actually squash are probably 2 or 3 feet apart. So it just all kind of depends on the plant. The smaller they are, the closer you can put them. But the bigger and bushier they are, then the farther apart you want them. They have to be able to compete for food, sunlight, and rain. So you don't want them too close.
Very good. Okay. So, all right. So we have the plants. We start getting them growing in our greenhouse, or we go and purchase them from the garden store already started. Now we're ready to put them in our garden bed, but we need to make sure first that our garden bed is ready for them. So there are 2 different kinds of garden beds that you can have, or there's probably a couple more than that, but let's just talk about the main 2.
Yeah.
One of them being a raised bed, which is above the ground. And then the second one being the internal in your ground in a space that's already been cleared for the plants. So
Right.
can you talk about how to prepare? Let's first talk about the raised bed.
Okay. Well, actually, here's what I'll do. I'm going to share our screen here. If I can figure out how to do this here. There we go. This one. Here's all my gardening solutions, okay? There are different ways you can garden. For example, if you've never started garden before, here's my solution for how to do your very, very first garden. Then my second one, if your excuse or your reason for not gardening is you have a bad back or bad knees, you're in a wheelchair, something like that, raised beds is your solution. If you have a very small yard, then we do square foot gardening or vertical gardening, which also uses raised beds. If you'll be traveling all summer long and you won't have time to water or weed, then your solution would be self-watering grow boxes. And I have links here how to do that. If you don't have a yard or you live in an apartment, you can do container gardening. And then here's the other one. All you have right now is lawn and you don't have time to start, a brand new fresh garden bed. Well, the solution here is just go buy a bag of topsoil and plunk it down right where you want your garden. And you cut a big X with an X-Acto knife into the bag and peel it back and plant right there in that bag of topsoil. So there's all sorts of different ways you can start your garden. And if you are starting like you said, your traditional kind of in the ground, flat garden, but all you have right now is sod, like yard grass, then this would be a good way to start it because you put these bags of soil onto your yard, your lawn, and grow it this year in the bag. Then in the fall, you dump that bag out and the grass underneath is all dead because it sat underneath the plastic bag all summer long. So that sod, that grass, yard grass is all dead. And now you have a nice little garden bed to start in the ground next year. And if you want, add a few more bags of topsoil to make it bigger and expand it if you want. So yeah, so the raised bed, now I've done both ways. I started mine, I marked off, my 5 by 10, little section, and then I just kept adding to it. And that's what I did for probably, 15, 17 years, most of my gardening time. Now I'm kind of getting older and getting down on the ground is getting harder. And so in the last 6 or 7 years, I've been converting my traditional bed into raised beds. And just every year I add 1 or 2 or 3 new raised beds to that 40 by 40 plot. And I have to say, if you can do it, start with raised beds. They really are so much easier. The work that goes into them is like, you put a lot of work in the front end of creating that bed. But when it comes time to harvest and weed and all that stuff, oh man, it just makes a world of difference. So much easier. And then the next year, it's already ready for me. I don't have to do a thing. So yeah, raised beds are the best way. Now, what to put in the raised bed for soil? You're right. If you go buy a bunch of topsoil, that can get a little expensive. What I do is I kind of dig a perimeter around where my bed is going to go, my raised bed is going to go, and I put all that soil that was in it, I put it into the middle. I just make this big pile in the middle. So I've kind of lowered the level of the soil, maybe 2 or 3 inches, put it all in the middle. Then, now most square foot gardenings will tell you to do 1/3 peat moss, 1/3 vermiculite, and 1/3 compost. But I do, because all of those things you'll have to buy, except for the compost. Most cities have a free compost giveaway at their city dump. Just call and ask if you don't know about it. Ours does. I drive up with my pickup and they just dump a whole bunch of compost in the back of my pickup and for free, and I go home and I'm thrilled. But what I do is that big pile of dirt that I took from the edges and put into the middle, I mix that in. So mine's actually 4 parts. It's 1/4 topsoil, 1/4 peat moss, 1/4 vermiculite, 1/4 compost. And then I just stir that all, and this is the fun part. This is where you get your kids out there. And you just get your hands in and you stir it all up so it's all really, really mixed up. And you'll have this beautiful, crumbly, soft, friable soil that your plants will just love you for. And they will just thrive and flourish in this mixture that you've made.
Very cool.
Now, let me say one other thing. Your raised beds, they can be anything from, 6 to 8 inches to 3 feet. If you don't want to ever get down on your hands and you want something you're always standing at, you can make your raised bed, 3 feet high. Mm-hmm. Now, you don't want to have to fill that whole 3 foot tall bin with soil. Mm-hmm. The plants never grow that deep, and that's an awful lot of soil to be pulling in. So mm-hmm. what you do is you fill the bottom 2/3 of that with sawdust mm-hmm. or styrofoam peanuts, styrofoam chunks of whatever. Just fill it with whatever, and then the top 1/3 is where you'll put that nice soil mix. Otherwise, that's way too much. But yeah, that's the nice thing about the raised beds. You can make them any height you want.
Nice. That's really cool. Really cool.
Yeah.
Let's talk about planting directly into the ground now. So I grew up in California, Central Valley. We have a lot of farmland around us, and in our yard, though, we had a lot of hard pan. And so whenever we would want to plant anything, whether it be flowers or fruits or vegetables, it was definitely an ordeal. And I'm curious, how do you approach that? How do you prepare soil that maybe has never been used for gardening?
Mm-hmm.
How do you prepare them for food production?
Yeah, or like in Utah where they grow rocks overnight.
Yes, we do.
Right? You go out and the next morning there's more rocks, and you pick all those out and there's more rocks the next day. I know. Okay, so that's where raised beds are. You'll have to amend the bottom line is you'll have to amend the soil, no matter if you have very thin topsoil like that, lots of rocks, lots of hard pan, you will have to amend it. And that's where that mix of compost and vermiculite. Now, vermiculite is this little gray mineral kind of thing that's very lightweight, and it makes the soil really light and it holds lots of water. And so peat moss, you get a great big bale of peat moss at Home Depot for $6, I think. It's not very expensive. And it also holds lots of moisture. Another nice thing about peat moss is it adds acidity to the soil, and plants grow better in acid soil. They're able to draw up the nutrients when the soil is acid. So, and that's one of the problems, for example, in southern Utah. I know southern Utah has really alkaline soil, and that makes it really hard to grow. So that's what, peat moss helps correct that. And compost. Now, everyone should be composting, have a little compost pile in the corner of their yard to be recycling all the leaves and vegetable waste and stuff, year round. But when you're making a raised bed or trying to amend a larger garden bed, you'll want lots of compost. So like I said, call your city garbage dump, landfill, whatever, and ask them, because pretty much every city nowadays composts, has a great big composting section, and they either give it away or they'll give it to you for just very, very little. It's very, very inexpensive. If you do have to pay for it, I know here it's like $8 for a pickup load, and yeah, it's crazy. You go share it with your neighbors.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, everyone just expect that unless you live like where I do, we have 3 feet of topsoil. It's black, crumbly soil that doesn't have a single rock in it at all. In fact, if you want rocks in your garden to landscape, you have to go buy them at the garden store. We don't have rocks anywhere. But very, very few people live in a place that has gorgeous black soil with no rocks and all. So pretty much everyone that's watching this, just plan on, you're going to want to improve your soil with those ingredients.
Okay. So it sounds like that the first step is to decide the space where you're going to garden.
Mm-hmm.
Find it, whether it be a piece of in the ground that you have a space available outside your home, or if you just choose to do a raised bed of some sort. Mm-hmm. Or another one of the options that we'll put a link to Charlene's website where she goes through the different options and different excuses why people don't garden. So we'll put a link here, and then you can look through it and see what makes most sense to you. So you first decide where you're going to grow. Then you also next decide what you're going to grow. And you gave some great tips on some easy plants to start with and how to get going, even if you're just a brand newbie, and how to kind of progress over time. Mm-hmm. And then, actually, I'm jumping out of order. I'm jumping out of order here. Before you decide what to grow, you prepare the soil first, mm-hmm. and then you kind of assess what you're going to grow and see how much space you have so that you can grow it, and then get going. So, what is the timeline on things? So, it's end of March right now when we're doing this recording. Am I too late to get going? Am I too early? What do you pay attention to according to your climate?
Okay, first of all, there's no such thing as too late. You can always plant. And in fact, even here in North Dakota, one thing I do is in the fall, like late August, I will start planting lettuce and some of my more cold tolerant plants, lettuce and cabbage and kale. And I put them under a cold frame. It's just basically a window in a box, and cover, and it grows all winter long. Now I still have snow on the ground outside, but here in a couple weeks, I expect that snow to be gone. I'll go out to my garden and I'll open up those window boxes, and I will have plants growing inside, and I will start eating salads and a little bit of lettuce and a little bit of kale. I expect in the next 3 to 4 weeks. So. But that's by gardening, by planting things in the fall. And of course, if you live in California, oh my goodness, you can garden almost year round if you can protect, some of your plants through the coldest months. But here is this handy little guide that I got. It's called Clyde's Garden Planter. It costs $3. It's the coolest thing, because what you do is you find out when your average last day of frost is. That's this red line here. And you put it, for us, it's the end of May. So just before, after Mother's Day, but before Memorial Day. So I put that red line, and then it tells me when to plant all the different crops I want to plant, or when to start them indoors. So if I'm going to start them from seed indoors, I'll backtrack 6 to 8 weeks typically, and that's how long it'll take. See, these little guys are just 2 weeks old. So here in another 3, 4, 5 weeks, they'll be nice big ones like the kind that you see in your garden center. And and then Clyde also has a fall planter. Again, when is your first date of frost? And then it tells you when you can start planting things, based on your first
sliders. It slides.
Yeah, it slides. Yes, it slides back and forth to your date. You find out when your frost date is. And on my website, on my gardening thing, I have a link to how to find out what your frost date is and what your hardiness zone and all that kind of stuff that you need to know temperature wise for planning the dates that you're going to plant your garden.
Great.
So
I heard you say that if you're growing them from seedling and trying to get them ready to be planted outdoors, to make sure that you get that going about 6 to 8 weeks prior to the date that
the frost date. Yep, your planting day, whenever you plan to plant. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So again, and I'll send you the link on what things you can plant when. Radishes, onions, potatoes, and all your cabbage family plants like cabbage and broccoli. Those are all very cold tolerant. They love the cold. Peas love the cold. So you can plant them even a week or two before, it's directly into the garden, a week or two before your frost date, last expected frost date. And then too, if you extend it into the fall months, those plants, if you give them a little bit of protection, they'll continue to produce well into the fall and after you've had a few frosts in the fall. So you can, if you're planning and you kind of keep in mind, what the weather's like, you can have a good garden going for a good 5, 6, 7 months out of the year.
I love that. I am so excited to get going with planting and getting my garden started. I just want to share a few little tips and tricks resources that I found around. I showed these to Charlene before we jumped on the recording, and I want to show y'all where I see super cheap, great resources that I have here. So this is the little greenhouse, Jiffy greenhouse planters. These are for if you're ready to start from seedlings. This was maybe $5 to $7.
Yeah, they're not very much at all.
Super cheap. Over at Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's, you can find them there.
And let me tell you, if you're kind of too late to get started on seeds, look at these, and here in a couple months they'll go on clearance because no one's starting seeds anymore, and then you can get them for just a couple dollars and have them ready for next year.
That's a great idea because they don't go bad.
Right.
Love it.
Yeah.
So I found these as well over at Walmart. This was $3, and these are all-star strawberries. These are 10 roots, which will create 10 plants of strawberries that will produce throughout the summer. Also $3, 50 onion bulbs ready to just be stuck right into the ground, right into the garden. Super cheap and yet very valuable. This was actually one of the items that whenever I was preparedness planning amid this whole COVID thing happening, was that I need to have my onions. Onions. I can cook a lot of different things, but I just use that a lot in my cooking.
Yes.
And then also I found these cool raspberry, what would you even call it, a shrub?
Raspberry canes.
The canes. Okay, these are raspberry canes where they have the roots and everything inside here with a branch reaching up out of the bag and just put it in the ground. These will not fruit this year. These will be something that will fruit next year, but it's great to get these in the ground and get these going as well. They also at Walmart had the blueberry. They had blueberries there. They had blackberries and raspberries. They had all different kinds, and they are GMO free if that is something that matters to you. So those are just a couple of the things that I found, and I'm excited to get going in my garden. And I would love to hear more about what you all are doing in your gardens. Feel free to comment, to post, to reach out to us, and to share with us what you're doing to start your spring garden. Charlene, thank you so much,
My
so
pleasure.
much. I'm going to link your website in the show notes here, and also the resources that were talked about. And do you, by the way, do you have pictures of your garden on your website?
Yes, I do. I take pictures of my food that I've canned. I take pictures of my pie. They're like my little children. So I share, here's what I did. And I love showing pictures of what I've done.
I love that. I love that so much. I'm going to go on there and check out your gardening and watch as you continue
Yes.
and share what you do. Well, we will continue to have more conversations around gardening and around how to prepare our homes and our families and be able to grow our own food. So I'm sure at the end of the summer here, we'll probably need to have another follow-up conversation about what to do with
Yes.
all this food that we have. So
Oh, and one thing before we go, just to let your listeners know, I do have a booklet. It's 10, 12 pages on seed starting. It's everything you need to know from A to Z, first to end, how to start your garden seeds, your garden vegetables and plants indoors and plant them out successfully in the garden. And lucky you, it's free for the month of March. So I hope that everyone will take advantage of that and do it, make the most of this gardening season.
I love it. Fantastic. We'll put a link to that as well. Go get your free book from Charlene. She wrote it and making it available for free until the end of the month. So thank you again for being with us, and much love and light to everyone out there.